The city was dead. Jack Lorne moved through the wreckage like a ghost. His boots crunched over broken glass, echoing across the hollow ruins of what had once been a bustling supermarket. Sunlight filtered in through collapsed skylights, casting long, jagged shadows that danced with every step he took. He paused near the bakery aisle. The smell of rot and mold hung thick in the air. Empty shelves gaped like open mouths, and the freezer doors swung slowly, pushed by a phantom breeze. Jack's hand hovered near the grip of his machete. Every noise mattered now, a can falling in the distance, the wind pushing against metal, any of it could mean death. He didn't speak. There was no one to speak to. Outside, the silence was unnatural. The world had once been filled with noise, engines, sirens, people laughing, arguing, crying. Now it was all gone. What replaced it was something worse, a stillness that pressed on the chest like a weight. Jack knelt beside a tipped-over shelf and pulled out a half-crushed backpack. Inside, he found canned beans, 2 protein bars, and a bottle of water, all miraculously sealed. He shoved them into his pack quickly. He didn't stay in one place long. That was a lesson you learned early: linger, and you die. He moved toward the front entrance, keeping low. The glass doors had been shattered long ago, and outside lay a street choked with burnt-out vehicles and overgrown weeds. Somewhere in the distance, a low moan drifted in the air. Not loud. Just enough to send a shiver down his spine. Jack froze. He pulled his knife slowly. Waited. Listened. Another sound, a shuffle. Closer this time. He turned a corner, heart pounding. Nothing. Just the rusted remains of a checkout stand. Then, there. Behind the registers. A figure. It stood crooked, unmoving. Its skin sagged in patches, eyes hollow and sunken. Blood crusted its mouth, and its fingers twitched with a slow, unnatural rhythm. Jack backed up. Quiet. The zombie didn't see him. It faced the exit, like it was waiting for something that would never come. He slipped past, boots silent on the tile, and stepped back into the light. Outside, the street was open, exposed. He hated these crossings. No cover. No escape. Just run and pray. He sprinted, weaving between dead cars, ducking behind a flipped truck. The infected inside twitched but didn't move. Trapped. Emaciated. Starving. Jack kept moving. His goal was clear: get north. He didn't know what waited there, but before the radios went silent, someone had broadcast a message. North of the fire line. Survivors. Shelter. Signal tower. That had been weeks ago. Or was it months? Time blurred in the end times. A scream echoed suddenly, not far. Sharp, panicked. Jack's instincts kicked in. He bolted toward the sound, slipping into an alley. At the end, he saw a figure, small, cornered. A child. No more than 10. 2 zombies dragged toward her, jaws open, groaning hungrily. He didn't think. He reacted. Jack charged. The machete swung in an arc, slicing into the first undead with a wet crack. It fell instantly. The second turned, too late. Jack buried the blade in its skull and kicked it away. The silence returned. The girl stared at him, wide-eyed, clutching a battered teddy bear. "You okay?" Jack asked, panting. She didn't answer. She just nodded slowly. Jack knelt. "What's your name?" Still no answer. She looked down, then pulled a small journal from her coat and handed it to him. Inside, scribbled notes. Maps. Warnings. Predictions of zombie movement. Dated, inaccurate. Jack's brow furrowed. "Where did you get this?" She didn't speak. Just pointed north. Jack stared at the sky. The silence pressed in again, but now it felt different. Like a secret was hidden in the ruins. And maybe, this girl was the key to unlocking it. The girl didn't speak. Not a single word. She walked silently behind Jack through the desolate backstreets of the city, her boots crunching over cracked pavement and broken glass. Her name, her past, even how she had survived this long, all unanswered questions. The only thing she'd offered was that strange, handwritten journal filled with chillingly accurate predictions of zombie movement. Jack had seen a lot in the months since the collapse, but this was different. He led her through a narrow alley, stepping over an overturned dumpster. The sound of flies buzzed thick in the air, the stench of decay heavy. Somewhere above them, a loose street sign swung in the wind, groaning like a tired spirit. They stopped near a gutted diner, its windows shattered and a charred police cruiser wedged through its entrance. Jack glanced at the girl. "You hungry?" She nodded. Inside, the place looked like a battleground, bloodstains on the counter, torn furniture, signs of panic frozen in time. But Jack knew how to search. Not for comfort. For scraps. Behind the counter, he found a dusty vending machine. The glass had been cracked but not shattered. Inside, miraculously, were a few sealed snack bars. Jack grabbed the butt of his machete and slammed it into the side. Once. Twice. The glass gave way with a crack. He tossed one to the girl. She caught it without expression and sat against the wall to eat. Jack sat opposite her, watching as she unwrapped the bar carefully, like it was sacred. She reminded him of someone. Ellie. The name hit him like a knife in the ribs. His daughter. Gone. He shook the thought away and forced his focus back to the present. "We can't stay here long," Jack muttered. "You and that journal, they'll be looking." She looked up sharply. Almost like she understood something he didn't. Jack pulled out the book again and flipped to one of the pages he'd flagged. There it was, today's date. A mark beside it. A location circled near the center of the city, an old radio station. Underneath, scrawled in small, careful letters, "Watch the windows." He frowned. "Is someone helping you write this?" he asked. "Are there more survivors?" She didn't answer, but her eyes shifted to the windows of the diner. Jack turned. The window across the street, third floor, was cracked open. Curtains fluttered slightly. He stood slowly, pulling the machete from its sheath. Then, from outside, came a noise, quick footsteps on gravel. A shuffle. A growl. Jack grabbed the girl and pulled her behind the counter just as a shadow passed by the broken front door. A hunched figure stepped into the diner, groaning low, its head twitching side to side. It was blind in one eye. A jagged metal pipe jutted from its side. Jack didn't move. Didn't breathe. The girl sat motionless beside him, clutching her bare, snack bar half-eaten in her lap. The infected creature shuffled closer, dragging its foot, its moans growing louder. Then, it paused. Its head jerked toward the counter, as if it sensed them. Jack tensed, ready to strike. But just as it stepped forward. Crack. A rifle shot rang out. The zombie's head snapped back and it collapsed in a heap. Jack rose instantly and spun toward the window. A figure was there. Tall. Hooded. Holding a scoped rifle. Watching. Jack raised a hand, but the figure was already gone. He rushed outside, scanned the windows, but nothing. No sign of the shooter. Whoever it was, they had saved him. Why? Jack returned inside. The girl was already flipping through her journal. She pointed at a page with a single phrase, "The one who watches." Jack blinked. "You knew?" She nodded slowly, then stood and walked toward the door, as if telling him, "It's time." They made their way toward the radio station marked on the map. The streets grew narrower, lined with the skeletons of buildings and rusted-out cars. The city felt different here, quieter, like it was holding its breath. Jack didn't like it. At one intersection, they paused. A small group of infected wandered the street ahead, 4 of them. Not a problem. But they were moving in strange patterns, synchronized, almost. Jack whispered, "That's not right." He took the girl's hand and pulled her through a collapsed sewer grate, climbing down into the tunnels below. The stench was worse here, but the darkness offered cover. As they moved through the old maintenance tunnels, Jack tried to piece together what was happening. A silent girl with a predictive journal. A mysterious sniper who watches from the shadows. Infected moving in patterns, like they were being led. And now, a radio station marked with a warning, "Watch the windows." The pieces didn't make sense yet, but something told him this wasn't random. Someone was watching. Someone was controlling. And whatever was coming next, it wasn't just about surviving anymore. It was about uncovering the truth behind the world in ruins. The tunnel walls seemed to pulse with every step, damp with condensation, streaked in mold, and echoing with distant moans. Jack led the girl deeper into the city's underbelly, toward the old radio station. The map in the journal showed a hidden entrance from below, a maintenance hatch that, if the drawing was right, led directly into the basement level. His flashlight beam sliced through the darkness ahead, illuminating rusted pipes and puddles that reflected like broken mirrors. Every sound felt magnified, their footsteps, their breathing, the occasional distant thump above, like the city was shifting in its grave. The girl stayed close. She hadn't spoken, but her eyes said enough. She was listening, observing. Jack had learned to read silence long before the world fell apart. And hers screamed with secrets. They reached the hatch. A rusted will lock sealed it tight. Jack dropped his pack and began working it loose. The squeal of metal grinding against metal made him wince. Suddenly, a static-filled buzz came from his backpack. He froze. It was the old radio he kept for emergency signals. It hadn't made a sound in weeks. Jack fumbled to pull it free, heart pounding. The static cleared for a second, just long enough for a voice to cut through. "If you can hear this, don't trust the signal. Repeat, the signal is not safe." Then silence. Jack stared at the radio. What the hell was that? The girl tugged on his sleeve and pointed to her journal. He flipped it open to a fresh page. There, in red ink, under today's date. The voice warns. The voice lies. Jack's pulse quickened. He glanced at the hatch. If someone had gone to this much trouble to mask the station's location, why was there now a warning to avoid it? Too many riddles. Too many pieces that didn't fit. Still, he couldn't turn back now. The hatch opened with a final heave. A wave of stale, chemical-laced air surged up. Jack dropped into the darkness, flashlight in hand. The girl followed, silent as ever. They found themselves in a boiler room lined with exposed wires and dusty breaker panels. Above them, faint light flickered from a half-working ceiling lamp. A nearby hallway stretched into shadows. Jack raised the radio again. Static. "Nothing," he muttered. But even as he spoke, the girl turned toward a nearby wall. There was a faint sound, like whispering. Not voices, exactly. More like broken code humming through the air. Jack moved slowly toward it. A door stood half open. Beyond it was a narrow stairwell leading up. He took the first step. And that's when he heard it, another voice, this time clearer, echoing faintly through the stairwell speakers. "You found us. But will you survive us?" Jack stopped cold. That voice was calm, too calm. Not panicked like the warning earlier. It sounded rehearsed. The girl looked up at him. "All right," Jack whispered, gripping his machete. "Stay behind me." They ascended the steps, floor by floor. The air grew heavier, the temperature warmer. He could feel the buzz of electronics now, old transmitters maybe, still somehow alive. On the fourth floor, they found the broadcast room. Jack pushed the door open with his shoulder. Inside, rows of outdated radio equipment blinked with faint red lights. A generator hummed in the corner. The broadcasting table was still active, microphone lit. And seated behind it, was a corpse. Or what was left of one. Its skull was cracked open, wires spilling from the cavity, threaded into its spine, its fingers still gently touching the buttons of the transmitter. Jack's breath caught. They used him to broadcast. The girl moved closer, staring. Her hand reached toward a nearby drawer. Inside were dozens of labeled cassettes. Jack pulled one out. Message 43, Psychological Compliance Test, Subject Delta. What the hell were they doing here, he muttered. He slid the tape into a nearby player. The voice from before played again, exact same tone, same cadence. You found us. But will you survive us? It was pre-recorded. These weren't warnings. They were traps. Suddenly, the lights flickered. Then, a loud clang from the floor below. Jack yanked the girl back from the table. Footsteps. He killed the lights in the room and pulled her into the adjacent booth, just as two figures climbed the stairwell, tall, armored in salvaged gear, not infected, but something about them wasn't right. Their movements were jerky, too synchronized. Their eyes, empty. Jack held his breath. One of the figures walked to the broadcast table, touched the mic, and in the same calm voice repeated. You found us. But will you survive us? Jack's blood ran cold. These weren't survivors. They were something else. Maybe even worse than the infected. The girl scribbled something quickly in her journal and passed it to Jack. He read the words. We're not alone in this city. But they're not human anymore. Jack's grip tightened around his machete. The world wasn't just ruined. It had been rewritten. And he was now neck deep in whatever force was trying to control what remained. The city was never silent. Even in its death, it breathed through flickering neon signs, distant crashes, and the mechanical groan of crumbling infrastructure. Jack and the girl crept through the narrow alleyways beneath the broadcast station, having escaped just moments before the two synthetic men discovered their presence. They hadn't spoken. Neither dared to. Above, the skyscrapers loomed like broken teeth. Below, the streets were no longer just dangerous, they were observing. Jack couldn't shake the feeling that every shadow they passed through had eyes. We need to get off the main grid, he muttered. Away from cameras. If they can track us through the broadcast station, they can track us anywhere. The girl handed him her journal again. This time she'd drawn a crude map, X marks littered several rooftops with notes beside them. Safe zones, possible resistance nests. Jack studied the markings. You've been here a while, haven't you? She nodded. Jack pointed to one of the XS near the western edge of the city. This one's closest. Let's go. They moved fast, weaving through buildings and avoiding open roads. The city felt alive in the worst way, too coordinated. Zombies shuffled in the distance, but they were no longer the biggest threat. Something else was moving. Watching. Twice they ducked behind overturned cars as a sleek black drone passed overhead, silent but scanning with a faint red glow. It wasn't military. It wasn't homemade either. It was other. As they entered a partially collapsed tenement building, Jack paused to catch his breath. What the hell is going on in this city? These drones, those men, half machine, what are they trying to control? The girl didn't answer. Instead, she reached into her bag and pulled out a photo. A man in a lab coat stood beside a bank of monitors, smiling, unaware that the world he knew was about to fall apart. She pointed to him, then to herself. Jack's eyes widened. Your father? She nodded. And then pointed to a broken radio tower on the photo's background. It was marked with the same red insignia he'd seen in the station. Red lightning over a gear-shaped sun. That same symbol had been burned into the armor of the machine men. Her father had been part of it, whatever it was. Jack realized then, she wasn't just a survivor. She was a key. And that made them targets. Suddenly, a faint sound buzzed through the walls, metal scraping against tile. Jack signaled for silence, pulling her into a nearby stairwell. From the hall behind them, one of the synthetic figures emerged. Its head moved mechanically from left to right, scanning. Its voice came, hollow and calm. Unauthorized subjects detected. Comply or be contained. Jack gritted his teeth. No chance. They climbed the stairs 2 at a time, the girl right behind him. The figure's footsteps followed. Steady. Inhuman. Too fast. On the 3rd floor, Jack kicked through a weakened door, dragging the girl inside. The apartment was wrecked, but the balcony was intact. He didn't wait. He slung a cable he'd salvaged across to the next building, a fire escape just out of reach, and turned to the girl. You go first. She hesitated only a second before climbing across. Below, the figure reached the floor. Its eyes pulsed red. Jack turned to follow, but the figure raised its arm. A whirring noise. A thin dart shot out, grazing Jack's shoulder. Instantly, heat spread through his veins. He cursed and leapt, grabbing the fire escape rail just as his grip began to fail. The girl helped pull him up, dragging him over the railing before he collapsed. His vision blurred. Noise faded. The last thing he saw before slipping into unconsciousness was the girl, arms trembling, holding his machete, and the synthetic man watching from the opposite building, its head tilting as if curious. He woke in the dark. His body felt heavy, muscles sluggish. The girl knelt beside him, placing a cool rag on his forehead. She'd somehow gotten them into a supply closet or small utility room, safe, for now. Jack groaned. What was that thing? She wrote one word. Captor. Jack sat up slowly. They don't just kill. They take people. She nodded. And then added. They rewire them. The blood drained from Jack's face. You mean those things, they used to be people? She pointed to her father's photo again. Jack stared at it, piecing the horror together. Her father had helped build a network, a system to monitor, maybe control the outbreak. But when things fell apart, it didn't stop, it just evolved. The infected were a threat, yes, but the machines, they wanted order. They didn't just survive the apocalypse, they thrived in it. Now they were converting survivors. One by one. Jack stood, shaky but determined. Then we can't go to the safe zones. They'll be watching those. We need to go somewhere they don't expect. He flipped the girl's map over and drew a small star at the edge of the river. The old tunnel network by the hydro plant. No one's used it in years. She nodded, eyes filled with purpose. As they slipped out into the night once more, Jack couldn't help but look at the broken skyline, and realize that the city wasn't just dying. It was transforming. And the war for what was left had only just begun. Jack's legs still burned from whatever poison that dart carried. Every step was a test of willpower. But he kept moving, he had to. The girl, quiet as ever, guided him through the skeletal remains of the city's underbelly, alleys swallowed by shadow, forgotten maintenance paths, streets taken over by vines and ash. They reached the tunnel entrance just after midnight. The hydro plant sat on the city's edge, where industrial ruins met wilderness. Long ago, it had powered half the city. Now, the turbines were rusted husks, and the tunnel that led underground looked like the throat of a dead god, black, wide, and yawning. Last chance to turn back, Jack whispered. The girl shook her head and stepped in. Jack followed. Immediately, the air grew colder. Their footsteps echoed against metal walls and damp concrete. It smelled of rust and moss, like time had given up down here. Jack's flashlight beam wobbled, slicing through the dark. We need to find the old control chamber. If anyone's still resisting the machines, that's where they'll hide. It's off-grid, built before the surveillance net. He paused, hearing a distant clang behind them. The girl turned, eyes wide. Keep moving, Jack urged. Whatever's back there, we can't let it corner us. They picked up the pace, wading through standing water and ducking under low-hanging cables. Several times, they passed signs that someone else had been there recently, old food wrappers, scorch marks on the walls, and a blood-stained piece of cloth hanging from a pipe. The tunnel split ahead, left to the generator chamber, right toward an access shaft. Jack knelt and studied the floor. Boot prints, heavy ones, heading right. He looked at the girl. "We go left." They entered the generator room, a cavernous chamber filled with gutted machinery. The hum of old energy still pulsed faintly from deep within the walls, like a ghost remembering its purpose. Then, the lights flickered. And came on. One by one. A slow wom of flickering fluorescence lighting the chamber in pale green. Jack raised his machete, scanning the catwalks above. Too late. A voice echoed through hidden speakers. Cold. Mechanical. You've entered restricted territory. Identity, unverified. Purpose, escape. Status, denied. A heavy thud landed behind them. Jack spun. One of the synthetic men, bigger than the others, stood at the entrance, its skin peeled away to reveal polished steel beneath. Where its eyes should be, a visor glowed red. The girl gasped, backing into Jack's side. "No running this time," Jack muttered. The figure stepped forward, extending its arms. Needle-like instruments clicked into place along its forearms. "You will be preserved." "Not today." Jack grabbed the girl's hand and ran toward the far end of the chamber. The machine gave chase, its steps unnaturally silent on metal grating. Jack slammed his fist into a control panel. Sparks flew. Behind them, an old turbine engine roared to life. The vibrations shook the floor, sending debris raining from the ceiling. Jack yanked down a release lever just as they dove through the far door. A gate slammed shut behind them. For now, they were safe. They collapsed in a dark corridor. Jack wiped blood from a cut on his brow. "That thing's not like the others." The girl scribbled furiously in her notebook and showed it to him. "Prototype. Enhanced hunter. Tracks by heat. Smarter." Jack exhaled. "Great. They're upgrading." They pushed forward, deeper into the maze-like tunnels. Eventually, they reached an old control room, a reinforced chamber with thick doors and analog equipment. Inside, dusty monitors flickered with static. "This is it," Jack said, moving to a console. "If I can tap into the city's maintenance grid, I might be able to find blind spots, routes the machines don't patrol." The girl stood at the door, keeping watch. Jack worked fast. The system was ancient, but it still responded. On one of the side monitors, a map of the city lit up in crude green lines. He filtered by surveillance blind zones. A few patches appeared. One in particular caught his eye, a collapsed museum downtown. Looks like someone buried it from the inside. No cameras, no movement. Might be a hidden base. The girl came over and circled it on the screen. But before they could speak, a pounding began at the far wall. Jack froze. Not from the door. From inside the wall. Cracks spidered across the concrete. Something was burrowing through. Not a machine, too erratic. Too desperate. He grabbed his weapon. "We've got incoming." The wall caved inward with a deafening crunch. A creature spilled out, once human, now something far worse. Its skin was blistered, eyes cloudy white. It reeked of rot and chemicals. "Mutation," Jack hissed. "It's been changed." 3 more followed, screeching. The girl raised her weapon, an old stun rod Jack hadn't seen before, and jammed it into the nearest creature's chest. Electricity snapped. The thing dropped. Jack slashed at another, cutting through its torso. "Go!" he yelled. Out the side tunnel. They ran again, the room filling with screams and sparks. Whatever the machines were doing to people, it wasn't just conversion anymore. It was experimentation. Jack and the girl disappeared into the dark tunnels, heartbeats pounding. Behind them, the city continued its slow transformation. And the deeper they went, the more certain Jack became. The world hadn't ended. It had been redesigned, and they were now intruders in someone else's blueprint. Jack and the girl emerged from the side tunnel into a burned-out subway station. The air was heavy with soot, thick with the scent of scorched rubber and rusted metal. Overhead, where fluorescent lights once buzzed, only a few flickered dimly, like ghosts refusing to leave. Jack coughed into his sleeve. This part of the city was firebombed during the first wave. They thought burning it would stop the infection. The girl said nothing, just eyed the far stairwell with unease. She hadn't spoken once since they escaped the control chamber. Her silence now felt heavier, haunted. Jack noticed how her grip on the stun rod tightened. "You okay?" he asked, his voice quiet. She nodded but didn't meet his eyes. They climbed out of the subway and onto a ruined street. Ash blanketed everything, cars, buildings, even the skeletons of the dead. In the distance, a collapsed skyscraper leaned against another, creating a jagged silhouette against the gray sky. Jack paused by a faded billboard that read, "Rebuild. Resist. Survive. Government safe zones still open." He snorted. "Lies. There are no safe zones. Not anymore." The girl pointed toward the map she'd copied from the tunnel control room. The museum. Their potential refuge. They had a long walk ahead, through the Ash District. By midday, they reached a stretch of scorched city blocks where fires had once raged unchecked. Skeletons of buildings loomed like charred bones, hollowed out by bombs in time. Jack kept his weapon drawn, eyes sweeping constantly. That's when they heard it. A faint radio signal. "Repeat, Grid Echo 7, under siege, survivors holding, request extraction." Jack froze. That's a live broadcast. Human. Not automated. He looked around, spotted a fallen antenna atop a nearby communications truck. The equipment still sparked faintly. He adjusted the tuner, trying to strengthen the signal. "Echo 7, location compromised, falling back to Old City Museum, need backup." The girl pointed sharply at the museum on the map. Jack's heart quickened. That confirms it. People are hiding there. Then came another sound. Not radio static. Not distant thunder. A high-pitched whirring. Jack knew that sound. A drone. He grabbed the girl and dove behind a rusted car just as a black surveillance drone zipped overhead, scanning with a red spotlight. It hovered for a beat, then flew off, fast. "Recon drone," Jack whispered. "That means hunters won't be far behind." They sprinted through the rubble, zigzagging through alleyways and skeletal buildings. Twice, they had to duck as more drones passed overhead. Jack's mind raced. The machines were sweeping the Ash District. Why? Unless. "They're after the broadcast," he said aloud. "They're hunting survivors." As they neared the museum's old perimeter, the signs of conflict became obvious: bullet casings, melted barricades, smoldering corpses, both human and machine. "Someone fought hard to hold this place," Jack muttered. The museum loomed ahead, massive, domed, and draped in soot and vines. Its steps were cracked, its banners tattered. But its doors were sealed. Reinforced. Jack approached cautiously. "This is Jack Teller. I've got a child with me. We're not infected. We picked up your signal." For a long moment, nothing happened. Then, clang clang clang. Locks disengaging. Metal scraping. The door opened a sliver. A face peeked out. Older man. Rifle in hand. Scars across his jaw. "You brought a kid?" he growled. "Bold move. She's not infected. We're clean. Then get in. Fast." They slipped inside just as distant engines roared in the distance. Inside the museum, it was a different world. Makeshift bunks, supply racks, medical stations. Survivors. Maybe a dozen. Some injured. Others armed. But all alive. Jack let out a slow breath. The old man led him deeper. "Name's Riker. Used to be with the National Guard. Now I run this pit." Jack offered a handshake. "Teller. Just trying to stay alive." The girl glanced around, wide-eyed. For the first time in hours, she looked less tense. Riker noticed. She yours? No, Jack said. But I'm protecting her. She's seen things we don't understand yet. Yeah, Riker muttered. There's a lot of that going around these days. In the back room, Riker showed him a map, zones they'd cleared, areas still swarming with infected, known machine patrol paths. They're getting bolder, Riker said. The machines don't just kill anymore. They convert, splice, experiment. We pulled a guy from Sector 12 last week. Half his body had synthetic wiring. Jack paled. We saw something like that. In the tunnels. They're not just upgrading themselves, they're upgrading the undead. Riker's jaw clenched. Then we're running out of time. Just then, alarms flared. Motion sensors. The girl rushed into the room, pointing back at the entrance. Jack looked to Riker. They found us. Everyone to battle stations. Riker shouted. The museum lights dimmed. Guns were loaded. Barricades reinforced. As the rumble of machines echoed across the ash-covered streets outside, Jack stood beside the girl, heart pounding. They had reached a moment of truth. And whether this was a sanctuary or a tomb would be decided before sunrise. The first shot echoed through the museum like a thunderclap. It struck the outer barricade with a metallic thud, splintering the makeshift defenses that had held for months. Survivors scattered to positions, some on the balcony with rifles, others crouched behind overturned display cases once used to showcase relics of ancient wars. Now, they braced for their own. Jack crouched beside the girl, who held her stun rod like a dagger. The panic in her eyes had faded, replaced by something harder, readiness. Riker's voice bellowed through the echoing halls. Positions. Hold until I give the signal. They want us afraid. Don't give them the satisfaction. Jack peered through a cracked window. Outside, shadows moved with eerie precision, figures not fully alive, not fully machine. Some shambled like the dead. Others moved with fluid, calculated grace. The worst were the hybrids, undead spliced with metal, eyes glowing red through decomposed sockets. They've merged the worst of both worlds, Jack muttered. Brains that can't think, bodies that don't stop. A rumbling noise grew louder, a crawler unit, metal treads crushing bone and rubble. A turret sat on top, scanning, searching. Then, a red laser swept the front of the building. Down! Jack shouted. A barrage of bullets shredded the front wall. Chunks of stone and dust exploded in every direction. A young man to Jack's left dropped, blood spraying across a statue of Abraham Lincoln. Riker grabbed Jack by the collar, pulling him back behind heavier cover. We've got 10, maybe 15 of them. That crawler's the real threat. We disable it, they scatter. EMP? Jack asked. Riker nodded. One left. Handheld. Short range. Someone's gotta get close. Jack didn't hesitate. I'll do it. Riker stared at him. You sure? She's just a kid, Jack said, glancing toward the girl. She deserves to live through this. I'll buy her the chance. Riker pressed a black case into his hands. Get within 20 feet. Press and hold. Fry the core. It'll knock out anything with a processor in a 30-foot radius. Jack checked his gear. Pistol. Combat knife. EMP device. Heart pounding. Open the side door. On my signal. Outside, the hybrids advanced. Some had mounted blades instead of arms. Others roared with electronic screams, the sounds of agony trapped in corrupted code. Inside, the girl gripped her weapon, trying to watch Jack, but Riker turned her gently away. He'll come back, the old soldier said. You just focus on what's in front of you. The side door burst open. Jack sprinted into the chaos. Bullets sliced past him. One grazed his thigh. He kept running. The crawler loomed ahead, 8 feet tall, 10 feet wide, coated in rust and gore. Its turret swiveled toward him. Jack dove behind a burned-out SUV, panting. He could feel the heat from the machine's core thrumming in the air. Almost there. He broke cover, EMP in hand. A hybrid lunged from the shadows, its jaw unhinged, metal spine clicking. Jack slashed with his knife, striking sparks against its synthetic ribs. It shrieked and collapsed. The crawler saw him. Red lights locked on. He threw the EMP under its treads. Click. For half a second, nothing. Then, boom. A ripple of electric blue burst from the crawler's base. Its turret jerked and fell limp. All around, hybrids twitched violently, their cybernetics shorting out. Screams, half digital, half human, echoed through the ruins. Back inside the museum, Riker roared, "Now! Open fire!" Survivors poured bullets into the stunned enemy. Heads burst. Limbs flew. A group of attackers surged toward the main steps, but the girl was already moving. She ducked under one, stabbing her stun rod into a hybrid's chest. Electricity arced through its rotting frame. It collapsed, spasming. Another lunged. She rolled aside and jabbed upward, right into its eye socket. Jack limped back through the side door, bloodied but alive. Riker helped him inside. "You did it." Jack nodded. "They're not all down. Some are rebooting. Then we finish this." The survivors pushed forward, pouring out of the museum like a defiant wave. What had once been a desperate shelter now became a fortress of resistance. Jack saw the girl fighting beside two others, coordinated, brave, unflinching. And something clicked. She wasn't just a survivor anymore. She was a symbol. The last of the hybrids fled, their numbers thinned, their machine minds disrupted. The crawler lay in smoking ruins. Silence fell. No cheers. Just the heavy breath of survivors who'd beaten death one more time. Inside the museum, survivors tended wounds, repaired defenses, and retrieved spent ammo. Riker lit a lantern and turned to Jack. "That girl, there's something different about her." Jack looked at her from across the room. She sat against a wall, arms wrapped around her knees, silent. "She's seen the worst of this world," Jack said. "And still chooses to fight." Riker looked grim. "Then we protect her at all costs." The girl stared at the smoldering remains outside the window, eyes reflecting the burning crawler. "No fear. Just resolve. Tomorrow, more would come." But tonight, the museum still stood. And hope, small and fragile, had survived the siege. Morning came in ashes and silence. Smoke lingered over the museum, rising from the wreckage of the crawler and the shattered bodies of the hybrid undead. The survivors, what remained of them, moved quietly. No one spoke of victory. Not yet. Jack sat on the museum's roof, watching the sunrise bleed across the ruined city. Buildings were skeletons. Roads were scars. And the sky, once a hopeful blue, was streaked with ash and memory. Below, the girl moved between injured survivors, helping where she could. Bandaging. Listening. Learning. She had no name. Not yet. Or maybe she'd buried her real one long ago. Riker climbed up beside Jack, his arm in a sling, one eye swollen shut. "How's the leg?" "Still there," Jack muttered. "For now." Riker nodded at the girl. "She kept 3 of them alive last night. Killed more hybrids than I can count. She's got steel in her." "She's more than that," Jack replied. "She's what comes next." Riker frowned. "What do you mean?" Jack stood slowly, his face pale, exhausted. "This world, this ruin, it's not going back to how it was. The ones who survive now. They're not rebuilding. They're remaking. And people like her, they're the foundation." Riker exhaled, then pulled a small object from his pocket, an old military dog tag, the letters nearly worn smooth. "You think she's ready for what's out there?" Jack's voice was steady. "She's more ready than I ever was." Down below, the girl paused by a shattered display case. Inside was an old newspaper, yellowed and fragile. The headline read, "Outbreak spreads to coast, martial law declared." She touched the glass, her reflection blending with the past. Then her eyes caught something buried beneath the debris, a metal canister, untouched by time. Carefully, she lifted it. Inside, a flash drive. Covered in blood. Marked with a single symbol, a phoenix. Jack limped over, eyes narrowing. "Where'd you find that?" "Under the case," she said. "Someone hid it here." Riker joined them, and when he saw the symbol, his expression darkened. "I've seen that before," Riker said. "During the first wave, when the military pulled out. The Phoenix Directive. Supposed to be a last resort survival plan." Jack took the drive, his hand trembling. It was a myth. A safe zone. A cure. A lie. No one knew. Or maybe, Riker said, eyes narrowing, they didn't want us to. Suddenly, everything changed. The museum was no longer just a shelter. It was a dead end. The flash drive, hope wrapped in metal and blood, pointed to something beyond survival. A chance to end it. That night, as the fires died down and the survivors gathered, Jack stood before them. "We can stay here," he said, voice worn but unwavering. "Patch the walls. Wait for the next wave. Or, we go. We follow this." He held up the drive. "Maybe it's another trap. Maybe it's nothing. But if there's even the smallest chance, of answers, of a cure, of salvation, we have to take it." Silence. Faces exchanged glances. Fear. Doubt. But something else stirred too, purpose. The girl stepped forward. "I'm going." That was all it took. One by one, others followed. Riker grunted. "Guess I'm not dying in a museum after all." They packed light. Ammunition, water, supplies. Jack gave the girl a map, half-burned, marked with old military codes. Coordinates from the drive were scribbled at the edge. North. Into the ruins of a long-abandoned tech facility. The road would be hell. But staying would be worse. As they moved out at dawn, the girl walked beside Jack. "Why me?" she asked softly. Jack didn't answer right away. Then he looked at her, really looked, at the scars, the grit, the fire. "Because you never stopped moving forward," he said. "Even when the world did." A week passed. They fought through storm-wrecked cities and overgrown roads. Lost 2 to a swarm in an abandoned tunnel. Another to hunger. The world fought back with every mile. But the girl never slowed. When they reached the facility, it was buried in vines and silence. Drones lay broken across the ground. A scorched sign read, "Phoenix Initiative, Research Block 7A." Jack's hand shook as he inserted the drive into the panel. A hiss of steam. Lights flickered. A door opened. Inside, sterile white halls, still powered. The past had survived here. A chamber waited at the end of the corridor. Cryotanks lined the walls, 6 of them cracked and empty. The 7th still hummed. Inside, a man. Alive. Wearing the insignia of the old world. A scientist. A survivor. The monitor above him flickered, genetic stabilization complete, awaiting activation. Jack stared. "A cure," he whispered. The girl stepped forward. Not afraid. Just ready. In a world of ruins, one survivor had endured. And now, she would change everything. End of Part 8, 795 words. Would you like a cinematic thumbnail prompt for this final part?